Hey there, just wanted to show you real quick on the power of Cactus. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to take from a T12 that we have on a multifamily value add, typical T12 on any kind of syndication project here. We also have the rent roll, quite a standard rent roll for multifamily large projects. Right, details about the rent and the residential rent, facility fee, utility administration fees, all that kind of stuff. And then here you have, I think this one's quite lengthy. Yeah, not too bad, 25-page OM. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take all three of these documents and just throw it into Cactus, choose multifamily, of course, as my asset class. And then what we're gonna do is just drag that into Cactus and click continue to review. Now, something that's quite important here is the use of templates. Templates is a place for us to be able to standardize our input results, meaning LTV percentages, if we want to set a spread on top of SOFR or a treasury rate, for example, we can set our term as a 3, 5, 7, 10 year with a 30-year AM, 70% LTV, 1.5 lending fee, and a 24-month IO period. So once you've set all your templates in for any kind of acquisition details, income and expenses, all those kind of things, that can then be put into this model and it'll automatically drive you directly to your results. I'm not going to use the templates just to be able to show you a little bit of the back end. What it's doing right now is it takes about 3 to 6 minutes to be able to analyze all the details of these documents. Now that it's extracting the information, the next piece that it's going to bring us to is the audit function. The audit function simply suggests whether it has found any conflicts across the various document types that we've provided Cactus. So for example, the T12 GPRI, so gross potential rental income, might not match the one that was provided by the broker, and in which case we certainly want to be able to look at the different discrepancies between the documents and also pick and choose where we want to grab information on to be able to underwrite that relevant information. All right, so right off the bat here, it found no conflicts in the property details across this document. So there was a mention of renovations already completed. This is the address, rentable square footage, property type, year built, total units, and property name. And we can see the source of that information. If at any point we wanted to look at exactly where in the document it found this information, we just click the source here and it goes and highlights exactly where in the document it found that information. All right, next up is the financial data. So again, the OM doesn't match up with the T12. Classic. So we can always go in and look at exactly where in the documentation it was taking that information so that we are looking at the right place, for example. And so what we can do here is we can just take from the T12, because that's what I typically like to do across all documents. Let's take from the T12, and now we have our supplementary income, our gross potential rental income, we have our loss to lease, vacancy, operating expenses. Great. Now the OM has created the unit mix, but then we also have the rent roll, which has also created the unit mix. Something that's quite interesting here, however, is that we know that based on the property details that this is a 400 unit facility, but the rent roll only includes 396 and the OM does include the full 400. So what I'm going to do is I was quickly able to see that, so I'm going to move that into my model, and there you have it. Everything is in your inputs model, and then what this is going to do is provide to you the ability to export this into Excel, export this into your particular model as well. If you have a model mapped in Cactus, you can export RXL, create an LOI. Now, one thing that's quite interesting, of course, is this is a property that we're actually underwriting today, is this one here. And I want to go and check what the market looks like for rent. So I'm going to base this off of either price or distance. I'm also going to do type of property, and I'm going to do the year that it was built. And now we have a list of our comps that we want to select from, in which case we'll go and do that, and we can match these comps to our actual existing unit mix that we have as well. And there you have it. You have the current rent, the target rent, and market rent. Okay, so we have a large discrepancy here between what they're currently charging and what market is assuming. So we can always move that market rent into our target, and then we can take either from the T12's GPRI, which we did earlier, or we can take from the unit mix, which is slightly lower than the T12, we can see, by about 100,000. And then we can add a value add plan, which will automatically map the difference between the current rent and the market rent. Okay, and so now we have the discrepancy between the two. We can update our vacancy plan, change the timeline of this plan. It goes linearly across. We can set our detailed growth or just go with the standard 3 and 3. Set our CapEx reserve. All the incomes and expenses are automatically mapped in here. We set our LTC, let's say at 70% of purchase price, our interest rate at a 5-year term with treasury and a 2.5 spread. Maybe because this is multifamily, we'll go to 2.25 just to be safe. 30-year AM, 24-month interest only, and a 1.5% loan fee. We can add mezzanine debts. We can add seller financing in here as well, fully custom. So holding period at 10 years, closing costs at 1%, broker commission at 3%. We're finding the market cap rate is 505, but adjusted for this size and the year that this property was built, we're at a market cap rate of 5.01. We can always adjust this annual cap rate. And then we're going to add in our IRR and maybe our cash on cash, for example, minimums. And here you have your results. So considering I didn't know what the purchase price was at or what this property was truly valued at this given time, considering on the OM they didn't have an asking price, now I'm going and finding the valuation based off the NOI and the cap rate that we found, and then we can just make these adjustments either in the slider or in the original input where we can just make a massive adjustment. And one thing that you can see here is 2 valuation timelines, so one being at the starting NOI and the optimized NOI. So optimized is just that value add timeline that we suggested. We can create an LOI here, add a refinancing, add partnership, waterfalls, everything along those lines. We can see in here capital structure, DSCR, LTV at any given year, total profit across this deal, cumulative cash flow, demographics, geographics on drive time and radius. Market analysis goes into a little bit deeper. It also includes in those comps that we provided earlier, market comparisons, population growth, affordability, city analysis, crime data from the FBI, for example. Here we have our pro forma. This is an institutionalized view of pro forming. So we start at a GPRI and go all the way down past our contributions. And then here we have our financial metrics as well at each given year or each month. Document analysis is an extremely powerful platform. This essentially does a full analysis, SWOT, red flags, questions you should ask the brokers across all the documents that were provided, and it's leveraging our market data as well. So we have here the occupancy bridge analysis from the T12. We also have the red flags across this deal. So you can see here the B3 Ligon floor plan has a 50% vacancy rate, 8 out of 16 units, which is a major outlier and requires immediate investigation. The gap between physical occupancy and economic. The large negative gas utility expense in June 2024 skews the T12 utilities. And then here's some questions that we should ask the seller or the broker. Again, all of this can then be put into a shareable URL, which you can share with anyone. Anyone who accesses that URL, just heads up, can only see the results, not the inputs that you put in. The Excel, you can export, you can create an LOI, export directly into your own model, or have an executive summary PDF in here as well. Coming very soon, you'll be able to create an OM or an IM with your own branding and your own presentation.